Disney is a storied company whose films have become an integral part of our childhoods, thanks not only to their premium quality, but their attention to detail and the emotional resonance of their stories. Classics that teach the kids it's what's on the inside that matters, or what really matters is what's on the inside, or even self-respect. Meet the Robinsons was a little weird, but hey, Little Wonders was a banger, better than Hamilton, don't even try. It's easy to see what makes these films such a staple in every household when the work is so diverse but also respectful of the culture it presents since the 90s. Don't look before that. Whether that be a story about a quirky little white boy that's just trying to make some money, or a frail little white boy who gets to marry the coolest person in their society despite being an outsider, or even a white boy who finds his place in the world by breaking stuff. Or even a film about how cool it is being a coward. I was fed a tremendous series of lies when I was a child. Okay, I assume that you've seen the TikToks about Lilo and Stitch, more like Lilo and Snitch in your family, but we have to cover some things to describe how we got here. Despite the current topic, this is actually a trend Disney has been pretty tepid to engage with outside of the Dalmatian live-action remake in 2000, which is surprising because these films are generally pretty profitable and rely off puppeteering the work of more talented people who are probably dead, which is likely a sign somewhere in the corporate offices. Throughout the 90s, there were a few extremely successful examples, including The Flintstones, TMNT, The Grinch, and Kappa, each being a perfect film, and under the threat of perjury, this sentence is over. The success of those films, specifically The Flintstones and Kappa, that were gigantic successes, likely had a direct effect on the release of Scooby-Doo in 2002, its sequel, and Speed Racer in 2008. All four were adapted from animated shows from the 50s to the 70s that were aimed at children with a high production quantity and low budget. Like low budget. Look, this stuff isn't free. We can only afford to draw this body twice for the entire episode. A shelf of accomplishments, just use a real photo. It's on screen for 3 seconds. That book says the word cut, it's too late, the episode's already on air. These films lacked an overarching story to adapt from their source material, so the movies end up following their patterns, but end up being weirdly original and experimental. Sometimes it's a beautiful sequence that blends the physical racetrack with the emotions of the race. Sometimes it's a high-octane action sequence to dispose of a bomb that he could have thrown, or maybe it's Scooby-Doo sucker punching Fred. Who's to say? They're all great. The format of adaptation that we see today with a lot of MCU films originates around the early superhero films like the Spider-Man trilogy, where instead of adapting just one story, they collected bits from different story arcs and smoothed them together to create a cohesive screenplay, mixed in with some originality, like injecting Willem Dafoe with hallucinogens and just letting him go. By the release of the final movie in the trilogy, we started seeing a lot more edgy reframings of the original. Beastly, Snow White and the Huntsman, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's a live-action adaptation of the segment with the same name from the 1940 film Fantasia. This is about the time in the script where I say a joke. It isn't. Disney is trying to bury this. For some reason, who knows, but the truth will get out. These adaptations, while similar to their source material, make a tangible, sometimes overzealous effort to explore something new from the same, already well-tread foundation. Even if it is literally Beauty and the Beast, but the MySpace status bar is an integral part of the plot. Disney themselves have kind of followed this trend in the same period, movies like Maleficent and Alice in Wonderland, with the new spin being the perspective of the villain and being ugly. It was around this time that Disney started to transition into a period that we are in now, where they directly adapt not the source material, but their films that already adapted the source material, with this trend starting with Cinderella in 2015. And of all the films in their catalogue to remake, I get this one, I understand it. The original Cinderella is like a classic. It's extremely important as a film and in the history of feature-length animations, but maybe a second crack wouldn't hurt. I was unaware before rewatching this just how much of the runtime is watching mice. It's almost half of the film. It's not surprising. The majority of viewers have come to expect a more fleshed out experience, and outside of Cinderella, everyone just does what they need to in the story, and that's it. The prince that she literally marries at the end has, and I'm not exaggerating, less than 30 seconds of dialogue. 120 if you count the song. The mice haven't been removed from the remake, they still perform the same purpose in the script, but we don't get a 20-minute interlude showing them committing guerrilla warfare tactics on the cat. The prince now has a name, morals, a belief system, a worldview. They bond over it, they talk before the ball. The reason the prince opens the ball to everyone is because he wants to see her again. There's tension with the marriage, why he should marry. There's even a satisfying closure with the step family. Unfortunately, this is kind of the last serious from the ground up, we're going to turn this into like a kind of different film and fix the problems remake. Most of the films since then have been remasters, with Disney releasing the live action The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, Aladdin, Meg 2 the Trench, The Lion King, Lady and the Tramp, Mulan, Pinocchio, Peter Pan and Wendy, Jumanji, The Little Mermaid, Snow White, and Lilo and Stitch, along with other various non-remake adaptations or sequels. Beauty and the Beast ends up having fewer changes than Cinderella, most likely because the original was already kind of up to date with modern sensibilities, but it does get value out of its changes. The biggest one is that LeFou has been molded from a weaselly little runt into an emotionally intelligent gay man that equal parts wants to be with Gaston as he wants to be him. It makes LeFou much more empathetic, and the comedy comes more from him being funny as opposed to just laughing at him. The change in character means the changes to the song Gaston, wherein LeFou cheers him up, creates a much more interesting dynamic as the song has more flair and charm and he has more bravado singing it. It's a way for LeFou to cheer him up while also trying to gain his favor. I prefer it to the original by a massive margin. I want to stress that Josh Gad's performance is very good. It is a pure, complete upgrade over the original. Sometimes it feels like the joke is just that he is gay, but for the most part, it is just better in every single way. And I was not expecting that because right before watching it, I watched Mulan. So it's just not even close. It's not the only beneficial change. The servant's claims of Beast's true compassion is further pushed by flashbacks of his mother and a claim that his cruelty came mostly from his father. They regret that they didn't intervene. It doesn't justify why the child got collateraled with a magic artillery strike, but it does explain why they are involved with the curse, and it makes Beast's heel turn much more believable. The biggest problem is that with a story that's already got fleshed out characters, the majority of differences are going to be visual, and when you create characters with the intention of animation, the design either needs to be changed or risk looking out of place. Some of the redesigns are actually more imaginative or interesting than the original, but generally the servants end up looking cluttered and messy. Lumiere's face in particular is now entirely metal, so unless you are looking directly at him, it is impossible to see any of his emotions. He gets off pretty unscathed in comparison to the other members because teacups are smooth, so the face just kind of has to be painted on. It stands out a little bit, but at the very least it's expressive. You can see what they're doing. But it makes it more noticeable when the characters don't have faces, and they're just kind of like furniture. The film is still mostly okay. I liked some of the changes, the cast is good, the production level is great, but it is at this point chronologically that the differences become smaller and lessens the justification for the remake. The Lion King, one of the greatest achievements in visual effects from the last decade. It looks like a documentary, but when memorable musical numbers from the film look like this, what can you even do? There are a few differences, like Rafiki doesn't find out Simba's alive from the wind, which I think is worse, but it's sandwiched between 30 minutes of borderline unaltered scenes. Aladdin is the same film as before, but it's just less saturated, and they don't want to have the genie on screen for too long because visual effects are expensive. I want to point out, based off the way that I'm talking, I know I said part of our childhoods, that was an exclusive like I have no emotional connection to these films, but watching the animated version and then the live action remake side by side for a lot of these is just, it's so miserable. There is no better proof to me that these are cynical, pointless cash grabs that add nothing substantial to the original than the directors. Getting Guy Ritchie to direct your film and it having nothing in common with a Guy Ritchie film just shows that the people at the top want to sell something that they have already sold you. Snow White is the first genuinely troubling omen in this chronology. It displays a lot of the negative traits I've already mentioned, and it has some new ones. For instance, a lot of the frames start to get very cluttered and non-deliberate, if that makes sense. The previous films I've talked about and mentioned have had a lot of computer-generated graphics and environments, but they were usually very well informed by the original. They didn't stray too far and realistically only did what they needed to do. The ballroom is a pretty good example. In Snow White, a lot of the CGI'd environments are very visually dense and colourful, but also generic and sometimes difficult to look at, which is contrasted by scenes shot in a real forest, and it looks like a different film. Some moments it feels as if a very talented group of VFX artists created this extensive environment and then somebody used it with no restraint. Everything is colourful, everything is its max saturation, and everything is in focus, and it just doesn't work. The protagonists' roles have been changed, with the prince now just being some guy, and Snow White's royal heritage being the entire hitch of the film. Her being the fairest maiden is still the reason the evil queen tries to have her killed, but most of the characters just keep talking about her father, who's gonna be on the throne. Don't you remember the good old days? It gets weird. That's weird. A lot of Disney films preach the purity of character as the reason those people are important. It's the reason the huntsman can't bring himself to harm Snow White because she is so fair and beautiful. Now it's because she's royalty and therefore more important than regular people. I also want it known explicitly, Gal Gadot does suck in this. She is genuinely terrible. Performers that suck are regularly hired because they can sing and at some point they will need to. Sometimes it's the opposite and they use a voice double so that they can have an actor. This is a stunning case where neither are true. Lilo and Stitch is right now the most recent, and it is different from everything before it. It's not just a bland, cynical cash grab like those previous, but it also differs from the original, similar to Snow White, which is weird. Unlike Snow White's inherently dated screenplay, 2002's Lilo and Stitch is the most intricate, complex, and mature one that I have talked about so far, and therefore needed the fewest changes. Among the largest differences are that Gantu doesn't exist, which in turn makes Jumba purely evil. There is nothing redeeming about him. He never turns. Pleakley is no longer in drag, and the worst change by far is that Nani is willingly giving up guardianship of Lilo at the end of the film. I don't know if you caught this, but that's the thing that they will do anything to avoid in the first film. The cause of tension between Stitch and the family, the symbolic remains of a historically imperial America, as losing guardianship would effectively sever the ties between Lilo, her only living family member, and in turn, parts of her culture. When I said the story was already mature, that's what I mean. The commentary on the tourism industry and the political force of outsiders isn't accidental. It wasn't thrown in. The phrase, Ohana means family and family means nobody gets left behind, doesn't refer to just Stitch, it refers to Lilo. To Nani, Lilo being taken from her guardianship is akin to leaving her behind. It is, in her eyes, Stitch being ripped from his family and taken to jail. It raises questions that don't have good answers. Were these aspects changed accidentally by people that didn't understand the film, which is bad, or were they demanded by people higher up in order to push a political view, which is worse? Cobra Bubble's social worker responsibilities are now shouldered by Mr. Koa, a native. He's just now a CIA agent, and with Jumba being purely a villain, along with Stitch being taken at the climax, he gets to help Nani. Whether this was a change purely for the efficiency of the story, or Or perhaps it softens ripping Lilo from her home by having the caring community member that looks like them and sounds like them and talks like them pull the trigger, as opposed to an outsider and government employee, which may draw entirely intentional parallels to the state's history. It's the purpose of Bubbles' character, and it works extremely well in the original. Along with that, said outsider now receives a much more positive spotlight. Maybe it's not the reason. Maybe I'm getting crazier. Maybe I shouldn't eat the lead pipes. Maybe it means nothing. But the fact is, the original character made a point that even with good intentions and good people, the relationship between islanders and the mainland is complicated, especially involving the government, and this just ruins it. On the other hand, many of the people who actually had to make the film fought to keep Pleakley in drag and were, from above, told no. This is not an aesthetic difference, it is a difference in the theme. A great part of the film is that no one is necessarily wrong, but only the protagonists are right. Gantu believes Stitch is dangerous, Jumba believes Stitch is just his creation, Bubbles believes that Nani is struggling to raise Lilo properly, and all of them are partially right. Stitch is dangerous, but he chooses not to be. He is Jumba's creation, but he chooses his own family. Nani is explicitly borderline failing at raising Lilo, even after giving up on her dreams. But the point is, even then, the best place for Lilo is with her family. Yes, she struggles, but she doesn't need government intervention, she needs a community. Pleakley being in drag subtly kind of pushes this, as without any preconceived ideas, they happily engage in drag, the same way that without any prejudice, Lilo immediately treats Stitch like family. The guardianship thing, though, is way less defendable. Like, it seems to be an intentional effort to change the meaning of the film to be softer for people that like to use the phrase "that was ancient history" to describe events that happened less than 100 years ago. If you think I'm being dramatic, I am. It's fun, and I'm very good at it. However, in the original, on the night of losing custody, Nani sings a melancholic song to Lilo, and even though only half of it is in English, it is clearly a farewell. However, it's more than that. Nani sings a shortened version of Aloha O, which was written in 1878 by Queen Liliuokalani. I guess. I don't know. Most accounts place the song's origin at the farewell to Colonel James Boyd. Within the next 20 years, Hawaii would no longer be the same as America began enforcing its will, notably by changing voting laws to favor foreigners and by legally making it a crime to teach in a language that wasn't English. This nearly killed the native language and affects it even to this day. The reason I'm struggling to say words and names is it's impossible to find any examples. Like, praise be to whoever made this. I would have no clue otherwise. Look at me! Aloha O would quickly turn from a song about lovers to a song about a people saying goodbye to their home, and in part, their culture. 100 years ago, it was sung in grief, then in resilience, now in hope, and maybe someday it will be in pride and peace. It is not a cultural song, it is the cultural song. It is destructively beautiful, and not remotely surprising why it has remained popular within the culture and why it is in this film. Remember when this video was about the Sorcerer's Apprentice? Good times. I used to not have to bring up, like, catastrophic historical events that happened to minorities, and now it's just the only thing I do. How does this keep happening? The song is literally Nani saying goodbye to Lilo, but in the language of the film, it is a goodbye to the culture and the history that she can no longer share with her sister, expressed in a way that is significant to that culture, even if Lilo doesn't understand why. It proves to us, despite everything, the only thing Nani cares about is raising Lilo, not keeping her heart beating or making her cereal. It is being there for her family. This scene shouldn't be allowed to exist in a film where she goes to San Diego University or whatever to study marine biology and visit on the weekends with the portal gun. Like she's divorced and got visitation rights. It's not like the anti-tourism message or the commentary on the government's role in Hawaii would be like, it's not gone. It's still there-ish. There's moments where it's clear, but when you're competing with the original that was so clear and so concise and so multi-layered and just unapologetically about that, it kind of looks like you're just playing to the crowd, doing just enough work to make it seem like you're on their side when you're just not. Almost every change that the film has, big or small, just makes the film worse or further disconnects it from the culture. And at the end, they have the audacity to be like, this is an island of hope, belief, or whatever. And there's like footage of their flag in the wind, and it's like pretend patriotic. Bubble says, I made an oath to protect American citizens. And this woman goes, what do you think we are? And you can stay here. I'm gonna go to California. Were we watching the same film? Were they taking notes, watching the original with it muted? It has to be so intentional. My blood pressure is rising. I'm sorry. It's treated as a victory because Lilo stays with like David's grandmother. She gets custody instead of being in foster care and like deported to the mainland or something, which again, it feels like an insignificant change if it was a different film and you didn't like the original. Nani's goal was not to balance work and family, it was to raise her sister, no matter the cost. I feel insulted, and I'm literally this guy. That's all I have to say. I could go deeper and, do all of this, but that would take a lot of time and require me to pronounce a lot of words, and it probably wouldn't be very interesting to anyone but me. The conclusion is, I mean, if you want one, mixed. On the one hand, the Tangled remake that was happening this year or next year was postponed indefinitely because of the failure of Snow White. Yippee! However, Lilo and Stitch changed the film so much that came out less than 30 years ago that was timely and still relevant to a lot of issues today. And they changed it to make it borderline oppose the message of the first one. And it didn't need to be changed, and it's extremely successful. So, hey, maybe we see fewer bland, cynical cash grab remakes, and now we start to see more, maybe the villains weren't really wrong kind of remakes. Like, I'm so afraid right now. Like, Moana is like scheduled after Tangled, I'm pretty sure. What is the end of the film? She's gonna be like, actually, we shouldn't explore the oceans. We should stay right here. I mean, our people's history? That's great. But who cares about tradition? Let's just stay here. I fear for the Polynesians, is what I'm saying. I am not happy about this. I'm so not happy. Oh my god. They're gonna kill the Polynesians. No! My Polynesian culture. My heart! Disney is going to find and assault Stephen Adams, is what I'm saying. God. No! Okay. Goodbye. Au revoir. I'm gonna finish filming and I'm gonna go cry in that corner. I love film so much. Oh my god.